So the WNBA sent in their new proposal, and it's one of those things where you've got everything here. You've got everyone basically saying, oh, they sent the same proposal back again. However, did they give the players what they want? No. In reality, they aren't. But they did also, by the looks of things.
Watch that carefully. He's trying to sell you on something. The WNBA just sent their counter-proposal to the players, and the narrative being pushed is that it's essentially the same offer with minor tweaks. But when you actually break down the numbers, that story falls apart completely. The league added $650,000 to each team's salary cap. That's not nothing. That's $50,000 extra per player on a 12-person roster. And here's what nobody's talking about. For some players in this league, that's more than they made in an entire season just 2 years ago.
Which is huge. Like, again, that is almost as much as they were making all last season. Some of them players are making last season. If you were a hardship player, that's all you were making for a season. That 50K is more than what most players make over, it's not more than what most players overseas, probably in and around what a lot of players make overseas. And that has been added on in this new current CBA. So a lot of people are saying, okay, the players are like, oh, it's a slap in the face. The public are, but the players haven't said anything. These are the players that would have retweeted everything if they thought it was going to help them. And basically, they all...
Let's put this in perspective. A hardship contract player in the 2023 season made exactly that amount for the entire year, $50,000. The league just added that as a bonus on top of existing salaries. Now you can argue whether that's enough. You can debate whether the players deserve more, but what you can't do is claim nothing changed. The math doesn't support it. This is where the public narrative and the actual negotiations diverge completely. Social media erupted with claims that the owners sent back an identical proposal, that they're disrespecting the players, that this is a slap in the face. But here's the thing. The players themselves haven't said any of that. Not one statement from the Players Association, not one tweet from union leadership calling this insulting. That silence is deafening, and it tells you everything about what's really happening behind closed doors.
You've got now situations where you can't, even 50K extra, in the grand scheme of things, it looks pretty something, but they just added an extra, 12% to the salaries? On top of everything else, an extra 12% was added to the salaries. The average salary is 5.6 million divided by 12, which is, almost 500K? Like, very close to being 500K per player, which is a decent chunk higher, again, than what it was. And obviously, with the net revenue sharing, it's going to go up. Let's be real, they're going to hit some sort of net revenue targets. The thing is that they don't want it to be brought out of gross revenue. I don't think that's going to ever happen. But if you are the players, I think they're the concessions the players...
This is the critical detail everyone's missing. The new proposal sets the salary cap at $5.65 million per team. The previous offer was $5 million. That's a 12% increase in total player compensation. 12%. When's the last time you got a 12% raise at your job for doing the exact same work? Now here's where it gets interesting. The players initially wanted a revenue-sharing model based on gross revenue, asking for 50%, which would have meant a salary cap around $12.5 million per team. Then they adjusted to 30% of net revenue, which they calculated as $10.5 million per team. The league's counter at $5.65 million represents roughly 15% of projected revenue. That's not close to 30%, but it's also not the same proposal they sent before. The percentages matter here because they reveal the fundamental disagreement. The players want a revenue-sharing structure tied to league growth. The owners want a fixed salary structure with built-in increases. One model ties player compensation to performance and popularity. The other provides stability regardless of whether ratings go up or down. Neither side is objectively wrong. They're just protecting different interests.
Just give us more salary. And I absolutely believe if the players came back and didn't have anything to do with like great or revenue split or anything, and they just literally were like, okay, bump the salary cap to 7.5 million. I don't know, make the max salary 2 million. Make the max salary on a 1.8 million and bump the salary cap to 7.5 million. I think the likelihood of the league saying yes is high. And I think the reason why we're not seeing the league respond, or the players respond, is because they're having to think this through. And not only in a way of like they know that going publicly and demanding the owners change into the revenue model they want is not going to go anywhere. However, what they can possibly do is they very much can go to the league with new proposal based on what they've heard from the league, what they know the league are willing to get, and go to the max of what they fully...
This is the strategic pivot that could change everything. Instead of fighting over revenue-sharing percentages and gross versus net calculations, what if the players just asked for more money up front? Forget the complicated formulas. Forget the accounting debates about what counts as revenue. Just say, we want a $7.5 million salary cap and a maximum contract of $1.8 million. That's a concrete proposal. No ambiguity, no room for creative accounting. And here's why it might actually work. The league has already shown they're willing to move on salary. They went from $5 million to $5.65 million. That's proof they have more money available. They're just reluctant to tie it to a revenue-sharing formula that could explode if the league takes off, or that could create PR problems if revenue projections don't materialize. Think about it from the owner's perspective. They've lost money for 28 years. Not 1 year. Not a bad stretch. Nearly 3 decades of red ink. Now suddenly there's momentum, there's viewership growth, there's Caitlin Clark bringing unprecedented attention. They see the potential, but they also remember 2019, 2020, 21 when nobody cared and they were writing checks to keep the league alive. They're not going to agree to a structure that could bankrupt teams if the bubble bursts. The players, on the other hand, see the packed arenas in 2024. They see the merchandise flying off shelves. They see their jerseys selling out. They see the TV ratings that tripled in some markets, and they're thinking, we're the product, we should share in this success. That's not unreasonable, but it's also not the full picture, because the league's overall financials still show losses when you account for operating costs, travel, facilities, and everything else.
To get as much as you possibly can. But we're now in a situation where people are talking about the league's proposal as, oh, they sent back the same revenue split. They didn't. And like, first of all, apparently the players want 10 million salary and that's their 30%. But then initially they were looking for 50% at 12.5 million salary. Like, the percentages, no one's percentages seems to add up. Like, 30% was 10.5 million for the players, but yet 5.6 million is under 15%. Like, it doesn't, the percentages are a bit weird. Either way, regardless of what happens, I think we're close one way or the other. We are very, very close one way or the other to hearing what's going on. And there was a significant jump in salary. Everyone's like, oh, there wasn't this.
Here's what's really happening right now, and why the silence from both sides is actually significant. Negotiations have reached the point where public posturing becomes counterproductive. The players know that going to the media and demanding owners change their entire business model isn't going to accomplish anything except hardening positions. The owners know that lowballing at this stage risks a work stoppage that could kill all the momentum they've built. So what you're seeing is both sides doing the math behind closed doors. The players are calculating what's the maximum we can realistically get without triggering a lockout. The owners are calculating what's the minimum we need to offer to avoid a strike while still protecting ourselves financially. That's why this proposal at $5.65 million matters more than people realize. It's not the final offer, it's a signal. The league is saying, we're willing to go higher than $5 million, but we're not going to 30% revenue sharing. Now the players have to decide, do we push for $7 million, $7.5 million, maybe even $8 million in guaranteed salary? Or do we hold out for the revenue sharing model and risk everything?
We're close to something either being done or the players just striking. And my guess would be, if the players wanted to strike, they would have already sent out the inflatable rat. I think the AU talk probably went like, look, we can't turn down this money. We're struggling to survive. We can't turn down this money. Rather, and whatever about the trust in the PA. Because unlike a lot of other in the other things where it's like the NBA, you can afford to sit out. There is a legitimate chance, because there are people that are shareholders in the WNBA that want to burn down the league. That is the risk. That is the big risk, is that there are people that are shareholders that don't care about the league and could burn it down.
This is the nightmare scenario that nobody wants to talk about publicly, but everyone's thinking about privately. There are shareholders in the WNBA who would be perfectly fine with the league folding. Not because they hate women's basketball, not because they're trying to sabotage anything, but because they've been bleeding money for 3 decades and they're tired of it. If the players strike, if there's a prolonged work stoppage, if the 2025 season gets canceled or delayed significantly, some of these owners will see it as an exit opportunity. They'll vote to dissolve the league, take their losses, and move on. That's the leverage the owners have that nobody wants to acknowledge. The NBA can afford a lockout because the players and owners both know the league will survive. The WNBA doesn't have that luxury. And here's the really uncomfortable truth: walking away from the WNBA might actually be better for women's basketball long-term. Think about it. Unrivaled is already operating. The Big Three model exists. International leagues are thriving. If the WNBA collapsed, you'd likely see a new league emerge within 2 years, probably with better revenue sharing from the start because it wouldn't be carrying 30 years of baggage. But that's a massive risk for current players who are in their prime right now and can't afford to lose 2 seasons waiting for a new league to form.
I think it's done. I think the relevancy of women's basketball is done if there's a lockout, and I think they've already the boom is done. The momentum's in a bad spot. We've seen it in Unrivaled, it's not going well, but it could always come back. That being said, they're coming into the 2026 season no matter what. People lose attention quick, and with the World Cup happening, with the NBA mattering more, with this draft being insane in the NBA, it was a perfect storm when 2024 was a really shitty NBA Finals, followed by a really shitty NBA draft, followed by summer league where no one cared. We have this year's draft, which is quite big. So they're competing with a lot over the summer. Even if the league does happen, it'll be tough to replicate. It'll be tough to replicate the 2025 numbers, or realistically 2024 numbers, because 2024 numbers and doesn't matter because they don't have the new rating system, and that was when it was relevant and people were talking about every day on talk shows, which I don't see happening.
This is where the timing becomes absolutely critical, and why the momentum argument cuts both ways. Yes, the WNBA had an incredible 2024 season. Caitlin Clark brought unprecedented attention. Viewership records fell. Arenas sold out. The cultural moment was undeniable, but here's what happens if there's no 2025 season. All of that momentum evaporates. Not slowly, instantly. Sports fans have short memories and unlimited options. The 2026 World Cup is coming. The NBA draft class this year is loaded with generational talent. College basketball will dominate the spring conversation. If the WNBA goes dark for a year, they're not picking up where they left off, they're starting over from scratch. And the competition for attention is only getting fiercer. Unrivaled is running right now with decent viewership. They're proving that women's basketball can exist outside the WNBA structure. If Unrivaled has a successful season while the WNBA is locked out, that shifts leverage permanently. Suddenly players have a real alternative, and owners lose their monopoly position. The 2024 boom was also a perfect storm that's not easily replicated. You had a weak NBA Finals that nobody cared about. You had a terrible NBA draft class. You had Summer League that generated zero buzz. The WNBA filled a vacuum. But 2025 is different. Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, this draft class is must-watch television. The NBA will matter more this summer. The WNBA will be competing for attention in ways they didn't have to in 2024. That's why both sides need to get this done. The players need to secure their money while the league has it and while the attention is still there. The owners need to lock in their talent before Unrivaled or some other league starts poaching stars with better offers. Neither side can afford a work stoppage, which means this negotiation is really about finding the number where both sides can claim victory. So here's what I think happens. The players come back with a counter-proposal around $7 million per team with a max contract at $1.5 million. No revenue sharing percentage. No complicated formulas. Just straight cash that both sides can budget for. The league counters at $6.5 million. They settle at $6.75 million, which represents a 35% increase from the previous CBA and gives everyone something to celebrate. The players get a massive raise that puts average salaries close to $600,000. The owners get cost certainty without tying themselves to a revenue-sharing model that could explode beyond their control. Both sides declare victory. The season starts on time. Everyone moves forward. But if I'm wrong, if the players hold firm on revenue sharing and the owners won't budge on fixed salaries, we're looking at a work stoppage. And if that happens, the WNBA as we know it might not survive. Not because the basketball isn't good enough. Not because there isn't an audience. But because the business model has always been fragile, and this is the moment where it either gets fixed or it breaks completely. The silence from both sides right now tells me they understand the stakes. The Players Association isn't mobilizing for a strike. They're not holding press conferences or organizing public campaigns. The league isn't leaking stories about ungrateful players or impossible demands. Both sides are negotiating seriously because both sides know what's at risk. That $5.65 million proposal wasn't an insult. It was an opening. The real question is whether the players recognize it as one and respond with a realistic counter, or whether they dig in on revenue sharing and force a confrontation that nobody actually wants. My prediction, they get it done before the end of February. The number lands somewhere between 6.5 and 7 million per team. The players declare victory for securing a historic raise. The owners declare victory for maintaining financial control. And we get basketball in 2025. But if we hit March and there's still no deal, start worrying. Because every day that passes makes it easier for owners to walk away and harder for the league to recover the momentum they built in 2024. So what do you think happens here? Do the players take the guaranteed money and run, or do they hold out for revenue sharing even if it means risking a lockout? Drop your prediction in the comments, because this is going to define the WNBA for the next decade. If you want to see how this plays out, subscribe so you don't miss the update when a deal finally gets done, or doesn't.